Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears, not on your laptops. Today's guest for episode number 322 is Julia B. Levine. She'll be here with us in just a few minutes, but before we get into it, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all of this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on that like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help poetry spread around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, as we always do, we're going to start out with our Poets Respond poet. We had a wonderful poem, just really imaginative this week, and Tarn Wilson is here to share it. Hey, Tarn, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Thanks so much for having me on. I just have to say that I just really appreciate the passion, energy, enthusiasm you bring to the work.
Oh, well, thanks so much. Well, I love this, speaking of which, the passion, enthusiasm, and energy in this poem. I mean, it was so creative, a way to go. And you know, it's Welcome to the Factory is what we're talking about. So why don't you tell us how this poem came to be? Where did you get the inspiration to write it, first of all?
So about a week ago, a friend of mine was really stuck in her creative process, and she said, "My factory is broken." And that phrase stuck in my head. And so I started just free writing on that phrase. And as poetry often does, it starts to hit on those things that are deeper that I've been avoiding thinking about. And I realized that humming in the background for me is all the stories about our government agencies that are disintegrating, these decades and decades of experience dissolving, and we're going to be feeling the repercussions of that for years to come. And in particular, I was feeling some grief and sadness for people who've devoted a lifetime of career and expertise to particular fields that are no longer being respected and are often being taken over by people who I don't feel like always have the best motives. So that's how the poem was inspired.
Yeah, a friend of mine, I think I mentioned this before when we had a government shutdown poem, but a friend of mine works at the NSA, and he was telling me that he spends like the first hour every day sort of consoling his team for all the, wild things that they have to do that make no sense. And, it's a really, the despair is very real in a lot of organizations and a lot of places. And I think Welcome to the Factory captured it so well, the sort of sense, even beyond just the government, there's this sense of like things falling apart lately. Things that we used to take for granted as working just more and more seem like they're not working. Like it feels like it's not just the political moment, but sort of civilization itself is sort of teetering in this way. And I don't know how much that's just, our perspective and we're projecting onto it or how much it's real, but it feels very real, at least.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and read this poem, Welcome to the Factory. It just captures that feeling so well.
Welcome to the factory. Look up. The ceilings are cavernous and full of mysterious humming ducks and flues. Our tap water is yellow and tastes of glue. The jockey has just been fired. The one who rides the horse that runs the treadmill that makes the electricity that runs the factory. All our patches are leaking. Watch for the legs escaping octopus hatches. That's the president there, wearing a chicken for a hat. He's just required all sensitivity trainings be scrapped and all directions be given in medieval French. Oh, that, just a mass of rats in their revival tent. In the dark corner, consultants cower under incinerators. Ignore the strange steam rising through the vent and the stream of oily dyes. Murdered sheep have backed up all the drains. Watch out! Eels wiggle through the cracks and gnaw our knees. Some advice? Limit all expressions to loyalty. Sketch any schemes on edible napkins. Paint your rage in our group mural hidden by the dumpster. Purchase the required health plan that promises to end death, worry, and wrinkles for $999.99 a month for eternity, non-refundable. Let's be clear. Directors have secret pockets where they keep our stolen rings. Ambition is forbidden. Rebels disappear through trap doors. Directors keep our ratings on clipboards and everyone is failing. Until we improve, they have eliminated all breaks. No, I don't know what the factory makes. That's not for us to know. The charts show profits growing and our bodies slowing. Our replacements will be called by our names.
Yeah, our replacements will be called by our names. What a chilling ending, and that is civilization, at least how it feels right now. Welcome to the Factory by Tarn Wilson. Thanks so much, Tarn, for sharing that. A really, really wonderful poem.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, once again, that was Tarn Wilson. And that line, I have to say, when I read this in submissions, I burst out laughing with it. That's the president there wearing a chicken for a hat. That cracks me up still. So, yeah, really imaginative piece there by Tarn Wilson. That was Sunday's Poem of the Day on Rattle.com, part of our Poets Response series, which we've been doing for about 12 years now. If you have a poem that relates or responds to current events, please do share it by Friday night at midnight. Then we'll consider it for publication on Sunday as the Poets Respond poem of that day. And if you are not yet, please sign up for our daily poem by email. All you got to do is go to rattle.com, find at the very bottom in the footer, you'll find a place you can enter your email address, then sign up. You get poems like that every day, including the Poets Respond poems on Sunday and a special bonus poem tomorrow too. So do check that out. And we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Julia B. Levine. So sit tight and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Julia B. Levine. Julia's appeared twice in Poets Respond herself, and she has a new chapbook, Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction, which is just out from Wolfson Press. Her poetry awards include the 2015 Northern California Book Award for her fourth collection, Small Disasters Seen in Sunlight, a 2024 Pushcart Prize, the 2024 Terrain Poetry Prize, the Oran Robert Perry Burke Award from the Southern Review, as well as the 2022 Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship for her work in building resiliency in teenagers in the context of climate change. Her fifth collection, Ordinary Psalms, was out from LSU and won a Nautilus Silver Award in poetry. And then her new book, of course, is that chapbook from Wolfson Press. So we have a whole lot to talk about. Really looking forward to it with Julia B. Levine. Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Hi, Tim. Thanks so much for having me. And I would like to second what Tarn said, that your enthusiasm in poetry and all that you do for us is amazing. So I'm very grateful.
Well, thanks so much for saying this. I just love hanging out with poets and getting to read a new, like really before the Rattlecast, I wasn't reading as much new poetry as I wanted to. And now I get to read a new book every week and then talk to the poet too and hang out with all the viewers and, all the people that we see every week too on the prompt lines. It's just so much fun. It's like my favorite part of the job for sure. And getting to meet you is a good part of that too. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So let's start out right off the top with the first poem that you wanted to share, which is from that book, Ordinary Psalms, and it's Psalm with Wren in Daylight Saving Time. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. So can I start by just saying a little bit about it?
Yeah, definitely. Please do. We love that.
Okay. So that book, Ordinary Psalms, which looks a little bit like this, began with a question from my first child when she was 7. And she wanted to know if I believed in God. And when I said, I don't know, she said, Mom, you better hurry up and figure that out. And then 30 years passed before I decided to seriously try and answer the question. And I lost a very close friend to suicide. Another had cancer. And then I've had this lifelong visual disease, and it progressed to the point that I couldn't see very well. And so I decided it was time to read and write my way into some kind of answer to this whole God thing. And I read a whole bunch of religious texts, and I rediscovered the book of Psalms, which really spoke to me because it was the first text I read that I felt like expressed as much doubt and anger and sorrow, as well as reverence and praise. Just the constant reverence and praise is hard when you're in a place of despair. You're like, oh yeah, I don't know about that. So I also was curious, because of this visual disability, how you distinguish sight from vision. And did vision help when sight failed was a question I wrote. Even though this poem starts the book, I wrote it towards the end of the project when I realized I'd really had spent years avoiding the truth, which was that I was going blind. I'm not blind because I had a really great doctor who saved one eye, but I am visually disabled. So there's a happiness to this too. So this is called Psalm with Wren in Daylight Saving Time. Late afternoon, I chop onions by feel, listening to crows cry to each other across the ridge. Gone now, white recipe card on the white floor, green sea glass found on a humble beach. But this hour I have been given back, carried out of gorse, red flash of maples, finches in our cedar. Meaning today I returned for the first time to the moment I understood I was going blind. Months I hid from myself that the V of geese flying over the valley extinguished too soon into fog. A darkness fine as sugar sifted over the chard, the roses. Now I hear the soft tick of a bird landing on the counter. Feel her gaze turn away from mine. When she hops table to chair to floor, I open all the windows and doors. Sometimes we must drag our grief out of the river and put our mouth on it. And then a loosening comes. One morning I rose and sat outside on my lawn under budded glory vines. There is no hurry. I stay to the stirrings of one so small it has to be a wren. Once I let the missing in, there was possibility. There was a heavy rain in sun, every blade of grass blurred, and for a moment after, only shine.
Yeah, that's a beautiful poem. That was Psalm with Wren in Daylight Savings Time from the book by Julia B. Levine, Ordinary Psalms. And that is such a fascinating thing, Julia, that distinction between vision versus sight, and how, what we think we see. One of the things we mention this haiku all the time, but it's the John Stevenson one, pretty sure my red is your red, and how fun that one is to think about, And there is a way that there's no way to know what images people are conjuring when images are so important to poetry, and yet you don't know what images are actually being conjured when you read or somebody reads your poems, And so there's a really interesting disconnect when you start to think about it from that level. And I was wondering if that changes the way at all that you think about using imagery in poems, that being so aware of that sort of slippage between what you envision and what you actually are seeing.
Wow, I love that idea of I'm pretty sure your red is my red, because I'm pretty sure it's not. And I have to say, one of the things I love most about not being able to see very well is how I have to rely on what other people see. And I love it because it's never what I expect it to be. Like I still maintain that if I think I see something, then it's there, even though it's probably not. Like all the time I look out on the bay and I think I see, this Hood Canal here. I think I see dolphins or whales and nobody else sees them, but I figure, well, why not? They're in there somewhere. I mean, what difference does it make? So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a really amazing thing to think about, whether your red is mine. And I think I think maybe the closest thing to that is that I know, as someone who has learned a lot about neuropsychology, that actual sight is a perceptual experience and it's a construction. It's not just a simple thing, it's a construction and it takes all parts of the brain. So I guess I feel like letting go of this idea that you have to see what's everyone else agrees on gives you a little more freedom.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. But do you apply that in your poetry at all? Like when you're there's this really interesting way, I think, that people early on when they're writing poems, we get to this at Critique of the Week all the time, where they think that being more general makes something be more relatable, so they don't want to be really specific. And I always have to say, like, no, the poetry lives in the specificity. Without that specificness, you don't sort of get that empathetic feeling where you become the speaker of the poem and sort of see what they see. But at the same time, there is something real to that. Like when you read a novel and you imagine the character and then you see the movie and it's like totally different who they cast and what they look like and what everything looks like. And you're like, oh man, who was wrong? But no one was wrong at the same time. But do you apply that? Because your poetry is very visually interesting, I guess I could say, all the time. There are a lot of visuals in these poems. Do you think about that as you're writing?
Well, I know there was a time I did. I think specificity is one of the most wonderful things because if you don't really see that well, you can construct and create what the poem needs with a lot more freedom than what you think, quote, reality is, right? So as I've gotten further in this, I started writing when I was 5 years old, which is so weird. So it's been like 62 years I've been writing poetry. I should be a lot better than I am. But I have to say, it's given me this sense of freedom that I can construct what I think the poem needs more than what's really happening. Especially because my vision's so bad, I have to spend so much time trying to see that I don't remember what I see. And that's an actual fact. Like the more time you spend in perception, the less time you have to put it into memory. So I have to make it up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's really interesting, and definitely can see how that lends itself to great poetry. Let's make sure we're rolling through poems fast enough. Let's do the next one, "The Lives of Saints."
Okay, so this one comes out of a concept in Jungian psychology that probably everybody knows called the shadow, and it refers to the largely unconscious attitude we have to our darker nature, our capacity to be mean, and even worse. In the Old and New Testament, which I read all of it, the shadow is represented by Levithian or the devil. But in my professional life, which my day job was a child psychologist, I'm now retired, I heard so many stories of shadow. And there was this one kid I worked with over a long span of years, though I rarely saw her because the system sort of worked against her health. And I was the lead psychologist at an emergency shelter for Child Protective Services. I don't know what you guys call it in Texas, but it's when kids are put into protective custody. And I watched her over the years reach a place where she'd been so betrayed that she trusted no one. And I wrote for years about this girl, but I couldn't really speak to the anger or the pain I felt about the entire situation and the system until I read The Lives of the Saints for this project. So this poem is called The Lives of the Saints. I stand at the kitchen sink, washing wine glasses. In the 5th century BCE, Heraclitus wrote that the way up is the way down. Like my 5 empty bottles of Merlot and recycle, and the depression I'd fallen into before quitting my job, clinical director of the county emergency shelter, which meant talking to children after their father lit them on fire, the foster parents forcing them to eat from a dog bowl on the floor, while the biological kids ate at the dinner table. The saints were all about suffering, scourges, crucifixion, drownings. Nothing but death led a saint to give up on intercession. As for me, I'd seen my last 4-point restraint of a preteen with HIV, last feral kid armed with a blade extracted from the pencil sharpener. Now I look out the kitchen window, remembering this one kid, her hair a dark forest of perfectly matched furs, her angled cheekbones, black eyes. In Catholicism, only an exercise of infallible magisterium makes a saint. Or to paraphrase Heraclitus, the Pope decides if the saint's way down is the way up. For 10 years, that girl was returned to us after every failed placement with a new tattoo or piercing for every John she tricked, only to hang herself on her 18th birthday. It was March, vernal equinox, first day of spring. Emancipated minor, they called her at social services, meaning no money, nowhere to go. Did I already say she was extraordinarily beautiful? Before her, I thought beauty was easy to see. Something the spirit feasted on, while the saints starved themselves on behalf of the afflicted. Now I set the wine glasses on a clean towel to dry, stare at the plum tree that secretly erupted into blossom overnight. I still can't tell you the girl's name, but I'm whispering it to myself. She taught me something about beauty. It is not just those impossibly perfect stars of petals detonated all at once. It's how you see the rain dark branches when the white lace is gone.
And that was The Lives of Saints from Ordinary Psalms by Julia B. Levine. And I did want to talk about your work as a clinical psychologist, because I always find that really interesting, the relationship between psychology and poetry. You know, we had James Pennebaker, the psychologist at the University of Texas here, in an interview talking about the way expressive writing is actually healing. And you know, I worked as a psychiatric counselor before this job, and so had a lot of experiences very much like the one with the teen you're talking to. I was working with adults with schizophrenia, but so many like early traumas and just things that were so hard to hear. And you know, there's a way that getting things out is so valuable, and having you know, just I guess the different parts of yourself hear yourself maybe is what it's really about. But then too, as a social worker, you know, yourself writing through the trauma that you experience sort of secondhand by hearing all these stories too seems really important, because the burnout was so, you know, so many people would work for a year or two and then just couldn't do it anymore because of how much emotional toll it took, like having empathy and caring so much for people who were so, you know, in such a difficult place, you know, their whole lives. So I wonder how the poetry and your professional work as a psychologist interplays, because it seems like it just does. It's almost like the same sort of thing going on in different places to me, but I don't know if that feels that way to you.
Well, first of all, I love what you said about yourself getting to hear parts of yourself. That's really an amazing insight, because that is so much about what talk therapy can do, is help you develop a cohesive sense of self, especially for people with trauma that dissociate and don't feel their different parts of themselves. But I would talk about it this way. First thing I would say is that, you know, I was a pretty abused kid, and I remember feeling like I wanted to be a witness of it for other people. I wanted kids to feel heard and listened to in a way I never felt. And so I felt really called to do that and then to write about it. I mean, that felt like the witnessing part, was to write about it. And of course, I always wrote in the way that I see, which is like it's a conglomeration of things. It's not necessarily exactly what happened, you know, like getting out of the way of the fact to find the truth. But I want to say that being a poet helped me be a better psychologist. I'm not sure being a psychologist helped me be a better poet. The thing about kids, though, is every single frickin' thing they say and do practically is a metaphor. You know, I mean, they're just so they're so rich in their verbal and nonverbal language, what they say and don't say. And so I felt really privileged too to get to see him. I mean, just even this idea that someone who's been through that much comes through. Every time she came back to this emergency shelter, she had another piercing. She had another tattoo, like a way of self-mutilating, but also marking, like I'm going to make something of this on my body. And I remember one kid, she tattooed her own name on her arm. And I said, "Why did you do that?" And she said, "That way I know who I am." And I just thought, wow, who thinks of that, So I don't know, does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, I think so. Another sort of thread I was thinking about too, though, was the way that as we write, we're pulling up things like from the deeper parts of ourselves, like sort of the understandings that we haven't articulated yet. And I'm wondering if your understanding of the way the mind works helps in that process of entering that maybe flow state of, where you're pulling things out sort of more spontaneously and speaking in more symbolic language. And, there is this sort of meditative space we get into, which I think is something that a psychotherapist would try to achieve with a client, as they're doing talk therapy, to get the stuff out. Do you find accessing your own psyche is part of the poetic process? And I guess you have any insights into how to reach that space? Because a lot of times, we have something that we sort of need to write about, and we love the process of writing poetry, but then we sort of don't know where to go next. The blank page can become intimidating too. And so do you find a way into yourself through your understanding of the psyche, I guess, is what I'm curious about.
Well, your questions are so good, Tim. I mean, the first thing I'd want to say is I had kind of a crisis as a psychologist towards the end, which is I started to really believe that words were a cover in a lot of ways for what the body knew, and that I started to work much more somatically and with much smaller words and much smaller language, and saw more change in people working that way, which was kind of upsetting to me because I loved the verbal language. I loved the details. I mean, there's that terrible part of me that was always perched like a little thief on my shoulder going, "Oh, that would be good for a poem." That's evil. But I have to say that I do really agree with you that as a poet, all the psychic material from dreams, all the psychic material from daydreams, all the psychic material, for example, seeing something that isn't there, which happens to me a lot. And also just randomly, I mean, I'll randomly, when I get stuck, go through books and just find a word, like those little things that spark you into a place you don't expect to go. Like, here's a dumb example. I was working on something this morning and I read this Latin and I said, "Oh, I'm going to figure out how to translate this Latin myself." And then I looked it up and I was completely wrong. But what I came up with, I liked even better. And that really got me into a different place in the poem by using it. So I do think there's a real disconnect between therapy and writing. I really do. I think writing is incredibly helpful for a human being, but you're not necessarily going to write really good poetry, right? Like you might do things that are really important for you, but it might not be a great poem. That's okay. Who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I love what you said that sometimes words are the cover for what the body knows. And that's
Yes.
like a line from a poem too. Just while we're talking on this subject, before I move on, I want to do more poems, but you mentioned that the way, and I've been doing that a lot too lately, where you sort of just randomly look sort of in a book and see what word like speaks to you if you're like stuck in a poem, and then that like sparks the imagination and takes you off into another way. And I wonder if, there's that whole concept of sort of that sort of so much of what we think are like post hoc justifications for our feelings. Again, like that words are a cover for what the body knows, But do you think when that happens that you're drawn to a word that you wanted to express? Or is the word like a fulcrum? Like, do you think you're subconsciously drawn to the word you wanted to use? Or do you think that the randomness of that word sparks something new? Like, which way, what came first, the chicken or the egg in that example?
Well, I think it would probably be both because I think it is the randomness. I mean, randomness is so important in poetry. Like you could get so stuck in a groove that's so boring, and you need something random to shake you out of it. But I also think, what word would really speak to you if it wasn't something that had some kind of magnetic attraction to whatever's going on for you at that moment? I mean, it was weird because um, this thing I tried to interpret, and I don't know Latin. I don't know Latin at all. Was something like, oh, I can't even remember what it actually meant, but I interpreted it as forgive irreparable time, which is what I really feel these days. Like I'm having a hard time forgiving the irreparable passing of time, especially because my husband has Parkinson's, and it's really hard for me to watch him sort of progress through this illness and what we're losing. And um, I just thought, wow, like, I don't know why I thought to do that, like, I don't know Latin, but that actually is a good trick too, if you ever try it, is to translate a language you can't translate.
Yeah, we had a prompt that was that one time, which was
Oh, really?
translate a poem from a language you don't know without looking up the words, just based on the sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is fascinating the way randomness adds to it. There's an example. I think there's a way that you can code sort of a mountain climbing is sort of a metaphor. But you can code a computer for like always take the highest step up. And what happens when you do that is you end up on these like smaller peaks, and you're just stuck there. So you have to add like every 2% of the time go down instead at random in order to like get off the bad peak to the higher peaks. And so there's a way that the randomness adds to how high you can climb. And that happens in like all models too. And it's really cool to think of that in poetry.
Oh my God, that is such a great metaphor. Like
Yeah.
how the brain works. That's such a great metaphor.
Yeah,
Because
like
you
the
feel
randomness.
stuck.
And yeah. Mm-hmm.
You feel like you can't get off it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go. We keep talking more about this, but let's do another poem next. The Anointing is the one that's
Okay. Well, I just want to say that there was a lot of despair and rage and helplessness in this collection because of what I was going through in my life. And I was really interested in this idea of ordinary situations that include tragedy and beauty as a challenge to the idea that God has a plan, or only God gives you what you can handle. I don't know why I really feel no about that. I mean, I know that works for some people, but it didn't for me. But I have to say that one day I was walking around the small suburban town where I live most of the time, Davis, and I must have had a cancellation because I was outside when I would normally be inside, and it was late spring and everything was beautiful because where I live, it's either incredibly boiling hot or it's foggy and cold. And it was one of those like 2 days out of the whole year where it wasn't. But what amazed me most was this woman who was probably unhoused stopped in front of me and said something to me I had never once not imagined ever hearing in this entire project, which was that I was a god. And it really shook me up, not necessarily in a good way at first. I was kind of freaked out by it. So I'm going to read that poem because it was such a strange experience. The Anointing. All morning, the ordinary has been filled with light. I can see her face, dirty as a child's, her greasy hair under a pink bandana. She crosses the street, her cart stuffed with clothes, an electrical cord dragging behind, and stares hard into my eyes. Announces, "You are a God I could love." Stars of Bethlehem float over the lawn, and further up the green belt, a teenaged couple roller skate, one in a dress with a white sash where wings might have been. Even the garbage truck reaches out in its mechanical hand with such precision. The dogs on the sidewalk lie down in praise. I continue on past the poppies toppled over with radiance, still helpless as any god to keep my friend on the next block from dying slowly of cancer. All we will ever have of divinity is each other and a wind rushing down from the blue sky, cut into the exact shape of the body I am walking through.
And that was The Anointing by Julia B. Levine from her book Ordinary Psalms. So this book, the second to last one you've written, is about that quest for understanding, the question you were asked about, what God is, or does God exist?
Or do you believe in God, Mom?
Yeah, or do you believe in God? Yeah. And so what did you, through the process of these poems, like what did you learn? Like how would you answer that question now?
I'm so happy you asked me that because that's what this last poem is about, is what I did come to believe. Thank you so much for asking that. I realize that you don't have to answer that question in the way other people do. It's okay to answer it in your own way. And to me, it has to do with this really audacious capacity we have as humans to feel small in the midst of the vast and to experience wonder and awe and to weep. And this poem, if it's okay if I go ahead and read it, is my attempt to speak to that.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is basically my definition. God. You know that hour in winter when the light is salted gauze, and you stop a moment in one of the last untouched fields in this landlocked valley, the new grass arrayed fat and green, thick as uncombed hair. Then the wild turkeys appear out of the brush in their dark pilgrim plumage and bowed heads and fan out over the field, hunters of seed and grub. This is the moment you need a prayer from your animal self. You need to praise the black mud, the thickened air, the pens of sheep in their black hoods and wool, even the treacherous, untended road that ends at a flooded slough. On your old bicycle with the jerry-rigged baskets and duct-taped seat, you pedal hard against a wind that has come up from the southwest carrying rain. Wind that breathes the least branch alive, wind that brings in the sea.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, beautiful explanation. And too, I think, for me, it's a similar feeling I have. If my kids ask, I say that there's a mystery. And as long as there's mystery, then that is God. There's something like that that's beyond our capacity to understand. And what you were talking about before with the difference between sight and vision, that gap is sort of like God. I mean, there's so many things that we just can't wrap our minds around. And, what that might be, who knows, And so I love that poem for explaining that.
Oh, thanks, Tim. That's a beautiful explanation you just gave.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next book now, the chapbook that just came out, which is called Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction. And you've worked, so explain a little bit, because I didn't understand this part of your biography really, how, as a clinical psychologist, you got into doing things with climate change. Was there any relationship there?
Okay, so right before I retired was the pandemic, right? And I worked privately and I saw kids sometimes for a really long time and in my private practice as opposed to my public community work. And what I saw in both situations were kids during the pandemic just plummeting, especially teenagers, but young kids too. I mean, they were in such grief about losing their social connections, and they also were being bombarded by all this social media that let them feel like there was no future. And so they were starting to say things to me like, what's the point of even going to college? The world's not going to be here. And we were also at the time, I don't know where you were living if it was like this, but we were also at the time in the summer in the midst of the worst wildfire season. You could not go outside. So these kids could not go outside and they couldn't be inside with friends. And everybody had to wear masks. It was just so depressing. And these kids were really doing so badly after all these years of working with them. And a lot of them ended up suicidal. And I thought, well, this isn't okay. Like, as soon as I retire, I need to figure out something to do. So you know, these Academy of American Poetry Poet Laureate fellowships where they give you a big chunk of money to do a project.
Mm-hmm.
And my project was to try to get these kids to feel some hope about things. And I had I spent a lot of time finding local experts to come in and talk about all the things they were doing to mitigate climate change. I had the kids write poems in response to prompts that were mostly eco poems. And then I did this technology part where the kids would read their own poem that they picked into a sound file, and then the sound file was set up so that it was geolocating, and they could listen on their phone to everybody's poem. And at the end of it, the 16 Rivers Press, which is this really wonderful collective press in the Bay Area, offered to find a grant to pay for a chapbook of whichever 20 poems we selected. And it became this part of the school's curriculum. They're still doing. We just did our third chapbook, and yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it definitely does. So can you talk a little bit? It's something I've been afraid of for a very long time. Is just the toll psychologically that all the talk of climate change has on especially young people, but adults too. So what, I don't know, what do you say to people who do think that the world's going to end by the time, that there's no point in going to college? Do you try to, what is the answer to that? Do you try to?
Well, the answer is to have them pointed towards all the amazing projects that are going on right now to try to mitigate it. I mean, our government is in a very despair. It's so hard to be hopeful right now with what our government's doing. But that doesn't stop private industry and a lot of brilliant scientists and local professionals from doing things that actually are motivated by money, because climate change, green energy, sustainable, renewable energy is, it's where it's at. And I don't know what the kids got out of it, but I'll tell you this. My feeling is if you talk to kids about things, they're going to be way better off than if you don't say anything and all they do is read media.
Mm-hmm.
And my feeling was I wanted these kids to have a chance to tell me how they felt about it. And they were furious, they were angry. And actually the kids are now even angrier than they were before. They just really dislike people my age. They think it's our fault, and that's fine. I mean, there's reasons to that, but I think one of the things the kids told me over the years was they felt like they found their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how that could be a bad thing. To me, that feels like, if nothing else, that's the most hopeful thing that came out of this. But I really secretly believe this feeling that people will talk to them about it now, that they teach it in science now. And these kids are in seventh grade. They're not like, in third grade. But I think it counteracts the really negative stuff they get in their social media feeds.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
all the kids were really excited. I mean, one of the things we did was in the chapbook. So there's the 20 poems we printed, but in the back there's a QR code. So every single kid who submitted, you can listen to their poem. So every kid is basically published that
Mm-hmm.
wanted to, and they are very excited about that too.
Yeah, well, that's definitely really cool. Why don't you start out by reading a poem from that chapbook?
Okay, well, this chapbook really wasn't about that project.
Mm-hmm.
It really was about the sort of liminal phase I found myself in when our 5-month-old grandson went through 2 years of a brutal treatment for leukemia. But I was really interested in this idea of the threshold between existence and death, and how hard it is to stay in a place like that, and what can happen when you do. And there are times in our lives that create a crisis in this regard, and my grandson's illness was one of them. And month after month, I had to process the horror and the terror of it all, and yet it made the beauty of the world and the doctors and nurses that cared for him and the baby himself all the more sweet and poignant. And I do feel that to some degree about climate change. I feel like you walk less carelessly through the world when you know that it is ill, So one of the things that happens to me a lot over my life is I have one history of life that is like this happened and this happened and this happened. But I have another history that's my dream life, where these dreams evolve over time. And this poem was based on this dream life I have, where I have 3 daughters, but in my dream life I have a son, and he was born stillborn. And so this poem is about that, and it's also about this terrible wildfire that we were living in an endangered area. We weren't evacuated, but we were endangered. So it's called Milk. Even in the dream, it's long past possible when I uncover my breast and hold the baby close to drink. How helpless he is, helpless as the mind in a deep dream to stop and change direction. Though on waking, the mind remembers our growing daughters and the room where we sleep, and beyond it, the outside made white with smoke from a fire. Remembers yesterday's eerie milk gold light we walked through, then stop beside a baby fox. Wasps lit on his skull, their black bodies beating his torn torso, while gnats and flies sipped at the glistening. And the work of those winged things was a fire chewing through manzanita and alder, Douglas fir and cedar, the maggots and flies and wasps carrying the forest out of the fox, the way the fire carries the forest out of the world. You asked if a mother fox could feel sadness. And because last night my mind had used a memory of my body to deceive me, had pressed our son close, believing if he drank, I could keep him. Today, I want to believe the dead fox was a twin, a mirror image following behind, the way a dream can shadow the mind, and the mind helpless against our stillborn son who lives inside my dreams and runs silent as a wild fox behind our daughters. It was almost dusk when we turned to go. So quickly the wasps and flies rose together, as if the black and yellow robe they wore in the milk gold light had slipped from the death they were covering. All of us helpless against the beauty of the troubled world as it burns.
Yeah, another beautiful poem. There was Milk from the new chapbook, Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction by Julia B. Levine. And yeah, it's such a fascinating thing to braid those two stories. Your grandson's cancer diagnosis, along with that sort of looming dread of environmental collapse that people feel. How did you know, to braid those two together? At what point did you realize that those two things went together in the way that a book fits together? Because they definitely do, but it seems like a poetic kind of leap to see that they do.
God, I don't know how to answer that. All I know is that living in this liminal state about our planet has completely marinated everything I think about and feel. And I am one of those people, and probably many poets feel this way, who feel saved by the beauty of the natural world. I have a good friend named Ellery Akers, who's an amazing poet, and she told me that she feels lonely all the time except when she's in nature. And I thought, oh yeah, that's so true. So I feel like, oh, my sustenance, this is my sustenance. What's going to happen to it? And then, bam, I'm plunged into this world of my grandson. And the whole experience of how do you process that he might die before you know him? And how do you keep yourself from loving someone who might die? It just felt so similar to me. I actually did have to write one poem, which I don't think I'm going to read, but there's a poem in there called Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction, where I felt like I had to write how I put those two things together. So if you read the book, you could see that I did that. But thank you for saying they do go together. Yeah, it is a leap.
Yeah, well, they definitely do, and it's hard to articulate exactly why. But there's something about, they're both the two worst endings you can imagine, maybe on sort of opposite ends of a continuum, I guess you could say. The idea of like childhood cancer is like when I see a commercial for like the children's hospital, I almost impulsively click it off so it doesn't enter my brain as a possibility. Like it's one of the few things, I'm not like an avoidant personality, but it's like I don't want that idea. Like we have 4 kids, And the idea of like, it's just something I do not want even in my brain in case there's a 0.0001% chance that affects the world or something. I mean,
no, I totally understand.
mm-hmm.
I totally understand. And my daughter she's not a poet, but if she was, she could never have written this book because the experience is so raw and horrific and terrible. And I had to be completely strong for her every single day, every single moment. And I couldn't cry. The one time I cried when he almost died because of a complication, she told me I had to leave the room, although everybody else was bawling.
Mm.
And I realized I couldn't process this unless I went home and wrote about it.
Yeah.
So I totally understand your feeling, Tim, and I really hope that nobody feels triggered by this because the fact of the matter is he is a miracle. He is thriving. He's 3 years old. And one of the things he said to us one day was, it was an anniversary of another complication he almost died from, and his mom took a picture of him and he was wearing his sunglasses. And she said, she said to him, Roger, why are you wearing your sunglasses? And he said, well, Mom, it's pouring rain. And when it stops raining, a rainbow will come out and I will need to see it. Which to me was a perfect metaphor for his entire life up to that point, like he was going to frickin' stay. He was going to fight and stay. So the good thing to know is that like it is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. It's atrocious, but it can have a really happy ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear too. Well, I should say at this point, if you are enjoying this conversation, make sure you click the like button. It's always helpful. That helps spread poetry around. The more likes per view we get, the more it's showed to other people. Whatever platform you're watching this or listening to this on, also leave reviews on iTunes or Spotify. That helps too. But if you have any questions for Julia, please leave them in the chat window, mostly on YouTube, but I'll peek into Facebook too. It helps if you put question in all bold so I can see it. But if you have any questions, leave them there and I'll pass them along. Let's hear the next poem, though. It's really relevant to what we were just talking about. Children's oncology floor.
Yeah, all I want to say is that the chemo, the side effects for a 5-month-old baby is just shocking. And, so this was the poem that won the Pushcart Prize, which I had thought you never really win. You just get nominated for.
Yeah, definitely me too.
So I guess it really takes something for that to happen, at least for me. Okay, children's oncology floor. It's so quiet that a baby crying down the hall resembles music. And so too, the uncommon beauty of this pigeon perched on a steel girdle 8 floors up, her marbled brown and white wings folded down, before she rises over rooftops out to San Francisco Bay. And I want that bird to fly deep into yesterday, where my grandson is simply a baby with a mouthful of plastic keys and a mobile of bright stars and moons singing its way around his head. And I want the pigeon to drop a note down to the prayer ladies posted outside the hospital chapel, the paper printed with his full name, Roger Stephen Hansen, so the faithful can beseech on his behalf, believing however it is they do, that God's will be done, with a Broviac catheter and feeding tube and caustic chemo excreted into diapers changed every hour as his new body burns from the inside out. And because I can only watch so long, I sit a while outside his room, listening to Chopin float down the hall from the nurse's station, wondering what it is like music that bridges one moment to the next. Then this child in a bright pink dress and hat turns the corner. She and her mother wheel an IV pole between them. Great job, honey, her mom says, as the girl's skeletal legs step haltingly across the floor. Surrender will be the last thing I have left. But for now, let this child walk out of her grave, showing us how slowly, deliberately it must be done.
Yeah, and that was children's oncology floor, again from Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction by Julia B. Levine. Julia, we didn't mention or talk about much the reason you got into writing poetry in the first place. But you said you've been writing poems since you were 6 years old. And, you've been doing all this, really important work as a psychologist, too. I'm wondering what you feel like, why should we be writing poetry? Like, just that general question, is it worth it to spend the last 50 plus years writing poems, and why,
I'd love to hear what you'd say, Tim. Well, I have to say, I think I first fell in love with poetry because my parents were really pretty disturbed and at times very unhappy people. And my father in particular loved to read. And he was a physician who loved Shakespeare. He loved poetry. And he used to read us Ogden Nash and laugh. And my mother, starting when I was 2, would read me Winnie the Pooh. And I just remember the sounds of it were there was something so happy about the sounds of it in her mouth, which was very strange to me. I'd never really seen her that happy. So between the two of them, I decided when I was 5 that I would write a poem, and I brought it to my dad, who never paid any attention to me, that was positive. And he actually typed it up on his little Selectric, and he read it back to me, this little 4-line poem. And I was like, aha, I have found the key to get my father's positive attention. And I started this whole series called I Didn't Mean to Do It, But, and it was all these poems about all the bad things that my brother and sister had done or I'd done. And I don't know, I was somehow elected like the family poet. But I have to say, when I went to college and wanted to write, I was told by the creative writing professor, there was only one. I went to Pomona College. There was only one, Robert Mezzi, and he told me I had no talent. He wouldn't let me.
Yeah, I had a class with Robert Mezzi. He was my professor once. I could totally see him just randomly saying, "Oh, you have no talent." It makes sense.
You did?
He was like that, yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel better. Well, that was it. That was the end. So
oh, wow.
I decided I would become a psychologist because I figured, well, I could find time to write if I was a psychologist. And I never stopped writing, which, I don't know, being told you're no good is probably good for you because it just makes you do the thing you can't stop doing, which for me has always been writing. I couldn't stop. And I didn't get my MFA until after I'd won the Northern California Book Award, because then I felt like an imposter. But then after I got an MFA, I realized that was a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things we don't really need, but we think we need at some point. Yeah. Although it's a fun experience sometimes. But you can get all you need really just watching the Rattlecast. So it's the truth of it.
What would you say to the question of is it worth it?
Well, I think what else is worth it? I was a molecular biology major working in an mRNA lab. About 20, 30 years ago. And, I just didn't, the narrow focus of science was like dull kind of. And I remember reading, Zen, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And there was a line where they're like, everybody's trying to extend life, but no one asks why. and I loved writing poetry at the time and just literature in general. And I thought maybe, I'd write novels or something too. But that idea of there's just more important than just solving problems, I guess, there's more to experience than that. And it's something that's really underserved, I guess you could say too. Poetry is something that's so valuable on that psychological level we were talking about before, on a communal level of being that bridge of empathy between people. I mean, it's the only medium where your breath, your own breath as a reader, is the medium that the artist is working in. I mean, that's a real intimacy, and nothing is more close than that to your soul. I mean, the spirit is the breath. That's what respiration is. And it's so that on some almost mystical level makes it really valuable. And yet we don't really pay much attention to it. And so that's what drew me to want to do it and keep doing it. It's something that's really important on this level that we neglect in our contemporary age of technology, I guess. So that would be my answer to it.
I love your answer. That's a beautiful answer. And I couldn't agree. Every single thing you said, I agree with. And if it's what really gets you going, it's what really gets you going. That's how it's always been for me. And the longer I do it and the more amazing people I meet that are poets, the happier I am.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I just love talking to poets every week too. It's just great. I used to love it 4 times a year back when we only interviewed poets 4 times. And now with this, it's every week. So that's great too. I'm looking at the questions in the chat. And they're reminding me, like often they do, because I always like to talk about the big topics. I want to know if people have seen ghosts or what they believe in God or where the universe came from. But there's all sorts of craft questions too that are really interesting to everybody as well. And so I'll read one. This is what Dick Westheimer wants to know. He says, question, your endings feel so inevitable. I'm wondering how you happen upon them. Do they reveal themselves to you without prompting, or do you just get the feeling this poem needs to find a door?
Wow. Well, that is such a compliment. Thank you. And especially from Dick Westheimer. Thank you so much. Um, you could probably answer this as well, but I mean, every poem is different. And I do feel like if you have an ending in a poem, that's like 70% of it. It's so hard to end a poem right, but I will really work myself to death to find the right ending. And like the one of the things I do is I try to figure out what is the problem with the ending I have, and then I go and look at people who I think have found an ending that really did work and what did they do. And one of the poems that helped me, like the one I just read about the on the children's oncology floor, was I saw a poem that Arcellus Gourmet had written, and this idea of walking into your grave, I'd never thought about that before, and I was like, oh my God, that is so helpful to figure out what to do at the end of this poem. And of course I couldn't steal her line, but I didn't actually need to because her poem was about something very different. So that's one thing I do. Another thing I do is I have been known to completely throw a poem away, and then I go back to it without looking at it and try to rewrite it. And sometimes that helps me figure out why my ending's not working. I mean, I really probably work too hard on it. I've always been that kind of person. Like I just work too hard on things, and so it's often not that fun, but it's what I do.
How do you know, like what is a good ending though? You mentioned like you work until you get the good, but what are the characteristics of it? Is it just that the body knows, like we were talking about before, and so on that level?
Well, I do have a lot of I am in a lot of workshop groups with friends of mine who are really good poets. Some of them have very recently been on your show, and they're incredibly wonderful uh, you know, advisors in terms of, oh, that's not working quite right. Or one of them in particular is really good at saying you should end the poem here. I don't always agree, of course, but that's really helpful too, because you may think you have the perfect ending. And then when someone else points it out, you're like, oh yeah, you're right. I was trying to get away with that and it didn't work. But I don't know. I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten more and more confidence that I can go back into a poem and kind of beat my head like Monty Python, against the poem until I find it. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it, my answer would really be perseverance. And how do you know? I don't know how you know. I don't know how to answer that, Tim. Can you? You have such good answers. Maybe you can just interview yourself next week.
Well, I guess you just feel it, like that feeling, which to me I think is the cognitive dissonance that comes with the different parts of yourself that were not in alignment suddenly aligning.
Yeah. Like, it is a feeling like that, like when you put Legos together, like snap.
Yeah, it's like the snap of like, oh, that was what I didn't quite understand. Like, and then it's like, and I think you do get like a sort of a flood of like emotion a little bit when you have that connection that was like, it's like longing for a bridge, and then the bridge is completed, and then your brain can talk to itself in that way. And you're like, oh, okay, this part of my brain knows this part. And I think that's the trick that we do as we're writing poems for ourselves, and then we find a way to pass that along to other people through that process of empathy. So that's what I think is going on.
Well, and that was the thing about ending the last poem I read, was that I was so depressed over the idea of how long this treatment was going to take. And, because it was going to be 2 years of this little boy being tortured a lot of the time. And I mean, he wasn't even a little boy, he was a baby. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you torture a baby who just came into this world? And then suddenly, when I remembered that image and then Arcellus Gourmet's idea of walking out of your grave, I was like, oh my gosh, like when I thought of it, that was the way I could put into it this idea that you just have to keep going. Mm-hmm. You cannot give up on this horrible journey until it's done, which is probably a metaphor for life, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 poems left. Let's read After Learning the Transplant May Have Failed.
Well, so as you well know, Tim, sometimes you have to write in form to contain what feels unbearable. And we had been through a year of treatments now, which meant that basically my grandson and my daughter and son-in-law lived in the hospital basically during that whole time. And then we would be in and out, and this would work and this didn't work. And then at the end of this terrible bone marrow transplant, the blood work said that, maybe the transplant didn't work, which would mean the cancer would return as more aggressive, the treatment's even worse, and the prognosis is much more worse. So I was just unbearably upset. And so I decided to write a sonnet. After learning the transplant may have failed, how hurried the light after rain, the snow geese wheeling across blue miles of wetlands, the ponds sun-steeped gold in late afternoon. If to pray is to ask and know there is no one and nothing to answer, then I will ask only to lie down in wet grass, wingless under this flyway, this vast sky given to passage. I will ask, please embed him in the crossing over. Please give my grandson time in the only once of it. If to pray is to plead, I will beg the dusk that worries these wild flocks as they rise and fall and cannot settle. We'll beg for him to stay long among us, please. It's late. Hurry now.
Yeah, so much power emotionally in that one. After learning the transplant may have failed. Let's see, there was another question by Nancy Tennell. She says, your writing is accessible to the reader and mystical at the same time. I consider your poetry to be quite spiritual. Do you see it that way?
Well, thank you very much. That's a wonderful thing to say. And I think when I think about your response, Tim, I think if mystery's at the heart of how you understand this idea of God, then yes, it is spiritual. And I do actually feel, I guess part of my feeling from being a psychologist for all these years and my own journey out of my own abuse has been there's something very amazingly spiritual about all of us, that an ordinary life is an amazing achievement in a lot of ways. And so I have no problem saying yes to that question. That's why I called the book Ordinary Psalms. I didn't want to have to make it about something that was religious, which is different than spirituality. I always like to think of what Bonnie Raitt said. Mm-hmm. She said, religion is for people who are scared to go to hell, and spirituality is for people who've been to hell and back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always think about just going back to the Bible, like the Psalms, it's at the very beginning, that the mission we were given by God, if such a God exists, is to name things, and it's easy to name like a cup or a lamp or something, but then naming these feelings and the complexity of our experience and giving it a name, which is like the whole poem, like that. Fiona Apple album where the title is like an entire poem. You know, if you're familiar with that one.
No, I don't know that one. I like Fiona Apple.
It's when the pawn something or other, but it's like a 300 word title, and it's kind of like that. It's like the poem is the name that we're giving this experience, and there is something spiritual about that on that level.
Well, that's a beautiful answer too, and I love that idea because in Judaism in particular, naming is incredibly important.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, the naming is like the power to contain it, I guess. And then by having that, you do become like a god of your own universe, which we all are because we're the zenith of our own experience and everything swirls around us in our own imagination. So I don't know. It kind of does make sense to me if you really think about it. And that's what I go with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have one poem left or room for one. What do you want to close out with?
Well, I'm going to read a really positive poem for the most part, which is after my grandson survived all this treatment, early on, he had a brain bleed and he almost died. That was probably the scariest. But then other terrifying things happened. He developed a septic infection. So he had septic shock from where his port developed an infection. And then he developed bone versus graft disease, which was pretty serious. So all these things, he just fought and fought and fought and fought to be here. And we were all very traumatized. Like every time we called one another, we had to put in the text, not an emergency, because we were all so scared that everything was an emergency. But at some point, 2 years into it, his parents felt like they could go away for a night. And they asked us to babysit, which we were very scared about, but very happy to do. And this was a poem I wrote about it because yeah, okay. So it's based on something he said to me, which is, when he says he's a bird, he can go so high. When he says he's a bird, he can go so high, even now that he's been stolen back. His grandfather and I are quiet before what passes unspoken from the almost not of this child's first year. That next world seemed too close and gleaming as I read to him about a finch perched in a pine. Good night, the forest says to him, though I'm still listening to the absence of ICU alarms and monitors in his not yet taken tomorrow, where he ran today, scaring up ravens, starlings, forcing them like buds to open their wings into the spirit world that we've named sky. Listen, all songbirds are Osines from the order Passeri, and they perch a lifetime here. Listen, finch, sparrow, pine siskin. I'm not asking for the never ending. I just want to call him little passerine, as if I believe it, that he has permission to stay for the whole story.
Well, what a beautiful poem to end on. And so glad that, he survived in the end and it worked out okay. How old is he now?
He's 3 and he's a little pain in the you-know-what, which is really a positive thing. I mean, his dad said the other day at Thanksgiving how grateful he was to be so annoyed at him.
Oh, that's a great feeling too. And what we should all try to remember is we're annoyed by our children from time to time.
Well, they're here with you and you get to be annoyed by them.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, thanks so much, Julia, for being a guest and sharing your work with us tonight. It's been so much fun talking, and your poems are great, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Tim. It was really an honor and a pleasure.
Oh, great. Well, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, that was Julia B. Levine. And reading from those 2 books, Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction and Ordinary Psalms. You can find them both on our website. Go to sites.google.com/Julia B. Levine to find her work there. You can find LSU Press publishes most of her full-length books, and the most recent chapbook, Lullaby for the Sixth Extinction, is from Wolfson Press. You can find that there direct from the publishers as well. That was Julia B. Levine. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem that's all about breaks. There's your prompt this week. If you have a poem that fits, all you have to do is first email it to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com, all one word. And we'll be able to show the poems on screen as you read them. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on Facebook and YouTube. I'll put the link there. Join, but only if you want to share a poem that fits this specific prompt. Keep in mind, we want to have a max time on camera of about 3 minutes. It should be about a one-page poem. And so we want to be cognizant of everyone else's time. We want to get to as many poets as possible and not stay up too late. So join if you would like to join, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Unfortunately, Katie Dozier, our, of course, Prompt Lines editor, my wife, and our associate editor, Rattle, could not be here tonight. She still got the cold that I had last week or 2 weeks ago, but she lost her voice and is sort of just can't participate. But she did write a wonderful poem. She'll be back next week, I'm sure, but we all miss Katie. The show does lose a lot of energy when she doesn't join us right now, so I apologize for that. Also apologize for the fact I think I forgot to push the button that says mute participants upon entry. And so if more people join in, you'll be live on mic, so be quiet as you tiptoe into the room, I guess I should say, because, that might be a problem. There's a little box you can click, and I must not have clicked it, which I usually do. All right, so the prompt for this week, though, was to... right here, write a poem that's all about breaks. Okay, so that was the prompt for this week. Write a poem that's all about breaks. And Katie, despite being sick, she's a real trooper. She's got a lot done during her illness. Not a lot of talking, but a lot of doing. And she wrote this poem, Breaks, which you'll be shocked to know is a Haibin. And it's called Breaks. And this is a memory. I always thought she would write a poem about this at some point, and I'm glad she finally did. It was a real significant experience in her life. Here we go. Breaks. Sometimes on long drives, I daydream about if John was still here. Senior year, his mother wandered around the day we got our portraits back. Not sure if she could give away all that remained, the wallet-sized pieces of him in a tuxedo. Maybe John's death is why I waited so long to drive, to own a car that allows me to feign control over this black beast with just one pedal, how it turns stopping into simply the absence of going. John would have been an architect, Ivy League. Once we kissed in the same car he was killed in. It was red. On our way to the Olive Garden, my boyfriend and I were the first ones stopped instead. digging in the shattered glass rainbows. Yeah, so very traumatic memory of somebody who died in Katie's high school. A powerful poem about that. That was Breaks by Katie Dozier. And my poem is this. I went back to, and this is one of the ones that's the most hot off the press. I didn't actually reread it when I finished it before pasting it into the document right before coming online, but it is part of my series of alliterative verse sonnets, if you want to call them that. This is called Dinner Night. The broken plate pretends that it's pasta, sliding slowly down the side of the wall, the way a parent pretends to be patient while his kid is coloring, crayon in a fist, all the language a line leaves at its labor and wafts of wax. But the wayward strands of stranded spaghetti still need to be sterile. So really it's clay, carefully crafted, painted with the patience our patrons expect. They refuse to remember the reason it was thrown. The forgetting is religion, but how fast it fell is fixed in the mind, and meaning is made in the way the chips of china chattered on the floor in a fountain of foam. Only a moment before becoming bereft, the sauce slid its reddish smear. Each night we negate the neglect to clean it up. What remains rises and resets. So that is Dinner Night from a manuscript I'm working on right now, trying to keep it a little more consistent with poetry, seeing how that goes. Anyway, that is my poem for this week. Let's see what everybody else has to share. We've got about 13 people, a baker's dozen on the line. And do remind everybody that I forgot to click that button to make sure you're muted on entry. So it's going to be a lot of hot mic situations going on. And I'm going to be as quick as I can on the trigger. I was looking in the middle of the break to try to, like, mid-show change that, and I can't see it. So anyway, there's that warning. Let's start with Nancy Tennell, who had a great question during the show. Hi, Nancy. How you doing?
I'm good. I realized that I have an epigram in this poem. You got the corrected copy, didn't you, Tim?
Oh, I'm sure I did. I'll pull it up.
It says, don't use that horrible first one. Use the corrected one.
Okay, yeah, I see the corrected version right here.
Okay, yeah. All right. This is called Broken Things, and it's pantomish. The seed breaks to give us the wheat. The soil breaks to give us the crop. The sky breaks to give us the rain. The wheat breaks to give us the bread. The bread breaks to give us the feast. Anne Boskamp. Anne, in her wisdom, taught us not to be afraid. Being a broken thing is sometimes beneficial, but those sorrowful breaks that linger on and on make us fear that the pain will never be gone. It's beneficial when breakfast breaks the night's fast. We know breaking bread with others can build strong bonds, yet fear the pain of brokenness will never be gone, and the healing we long for may not come. We need the strong bonds of community to help us break bad habits, find life, health, and peace. We may think our longed-for healing will never come. Addiction splits us into fragments. Wholeness is gone. Those who are broken search for life, health, and peace, walking slowly through their woundedness day by day. They will learn that facing brokenness can be beneficial, and think of Anne in her wisdom, who said, "Don't be afraid."
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nancy. And I love that quote. I'd never seen it before, but that's a wonderful epigraph to start with.
Well, she wrote a book called The Broken Way, and it deals with, she wrote it in response to her own brokenness and mental health situation. And I love that quote. And I was glad to sort of pay tribute to it by writing a poem based on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you did. Thanks for sharing that.
All right.
Definitely a quote to live by and a poem that deserves to be there. Thanks for sharing that, Nancy. And Nancy Tennell with Broken Things. Let's go next to Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Yep. So doing a sonnet.
Nice. I see the first line, so I'm laughing already. Okay, go ahead.
Should I take a break this week? I joined to like the rattle folk that break about the talk to things, but writing couldn't poem to bring, 'cause my this week word maker broke. As much as hate would I invoke excuses if together string, I worth could they be stomaching. Remember what I can't I spoke. I hold my tore a gaping thought. That's just ideal, it's not to say. I silent to remain in aught, to nothing have, if I convey. But poem the is this I've brought. Your words don't have thoughts every day.
Well, that is great. I love that. Like bringing the Jabberwocky to life, but making sense at the same time. Really fun. I really enjoyed that, Jared. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jared Campbell, creative as always, with Should I Take a Break this week? Next, let's go to Amanda Harris.
Like always, I had this like restless energy thinking, oh my God, when am I being picked?
Well, that's part of the excitement, the dopamine rush of that moment being here, worth waiting for.
Absolutely. All right. So my poem is called Dialogue. Breaks are the only way the spirit rhymes with God. God, like the spirit, is made from breaks and then solidified with silence stripped from the tongue. War is tongue, you say, admiring the shadow that buries itself in your tea. When water sizzles, the steam it discards resembles a break. Breaks do not contain rhymes, but match them, mischiefs they are. In step. Lock your foot. Trace what faith leaves behind. Hell is vague madness. Hell is absent fear.
Great energy as your poems always have, Amanda. Thanks so much for sharing that dialogue.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Dialogue by Amanda Harris. Yeah, some great poems already today, and people being really concise with their work too, which is always fun. Let's go next to Christiana Doucette.
Hello.
Hey, Christiana, great to see you.
Good to see you too. Just pulling it up over here since
Me too.
I had the YouTube chat up. So I wrote one about portmanteau, which is when you have two words. It's not a compound word where you have the words right next to each other, but it's more like a suitcase. And that's why it's called a portmanteau, because it's based on that word. And so I tried to put as many portmanteau into this pantoum as I could.
Nice.
So, opening the portmanteau. We snap a suitcase open when it suits our case. The snide remarks turn into snark. A wordsmith melds romantasy of roots. They twist and splice until a new word sparks. The case is lowered. We remark with snark on that new space two words once squandered. That twist and splice. See how a new word sparks fresh takes? We chortle over what we've conjured. A new space. Two words in one. Who squanders jackalopes and labradoodles? They leap fresh lines to chortle over. What we've conjured cosplays old and new, melding from a heap of jackalopes we've doodled as they leap into our open suitcase. The word suits old tales. New cosplays melded from worn heaps. A wordsmith melds romantasy from roots.
Oh, that was great. I love the use of the form. It's so smooth through that pantomime, or pantoum, I should say, of portmanteaus, and so many portmanteaus. So creative, Christiana. Thanks for sharing that.
It was fun. It was very fun to write.
Yeah, well, it's a fun poem to read, too. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It was Christiana Doucette with Opening the Portmanteau. And we say all the time, Katie says, too, all the time, that it's the poets here are so amazing. And like last week, we had, I think 3 of our Pushcart Prize nominees were poets who are regulars here. We got, actually, speaking of another great poet, let's go next to Jeff Stumpa, who I just accepted a poem for our next summer's issue yesterday. So
thank you again.
It's great to have great poets here. It really makes the night. So thanks, everybody, and Jeff in particular, too. Hey, Jeff.
Hey there. So I have to apologize to anybody who's listening to this on the podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatnot, because I wrote a concrete poem. Mm-hmm. It's technically a monotic, where it's a one-line poem that's in conversation with its title, as opposed to there's a word that you can't actually say out loud, PWOERMD, which is a smushing together of poem and word, which are one-word poems, but they don't have titles. So for anybody watching on YouTube, you can see fault line. But if you're just listening, it's not going to work for you.
Well, that's great. Yeah, well, that's a great enticement to actually come for all those people who are on iTunes and whatnot to come and watch this portion of the episode so you can see what Jeff was getting about. And, you know, Jeff, there's so much obscure poetry knowledge that you have. I don't know where, like, if I had to go to one person to say, what is something I've never heard of before? Jeff Stumpo is the guy to go to. Where do you come up with all this stuff?
A lot of research. The really quick version is I've spent the entirety of 2025 writing a manuscript of poems in different forms, going as far back as like chants and sonnets and villanelles, all the way up to new things like a golden shovel or a unit. And then some things that I've like completely invented myself. Like I wrote a crossword puzzle in verse. And it's all for a particular manuscript that I finally, it's about 220 pages long, and I'm at a point where I've got people looking at it now.
Oh, very cool. Well, it's just a reminder to everybody, and Jeff too, that you can also submit portions of your manuscript to the Rattlecast Prize, which is something that I do want to remind everybody with that deadline coming up. But if you have a full length, trim it down to like 20 poems, and you got a chapbook. They both exist. So anyway, thanks, Jeff, for sharing that. And people will have to see what they were looking at with this poem, which is very cool. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah, it was Jeff Stumpo with a fault line. All right, and next let's go to Dick Westheimer.
Hello.
Hey, Dick, it's great to see you.
I just loved the interview today. It was like...
she was fun to talk to.
I love Julia's work, but I loved listening to the conversation. And it reminded me, I heard a line today. I was flying home listening to poetry podcasts, and I heard this line from poet Carol Ann Duffy, who said, "I don't believe in God, but one of the things I think I'd love if I did believe in God was the sense I was being listened to, and that's why I like poetry."
Yeah, that's really nice. I like that.
I really appreciated that. So this one is not concise. It's called The Best Revenge. The clouds break and reveal the cold pearl of the sun. Frost breath precedes me as I jog up the Stony Run Trail, which breaks to the left and up a hill. It emerges past a private boys' school, like the one I was sent to, and suddenly I'm back in 1969, forced to take sports every day after school. We were meant to be broken. Teddy Roosevelt was God of suffering. We'd play winter soccer in the ice and mud, laps on the cinder track every day, no matter the weather, the unheated concrete locker room and its splintered wooden benches. I'd break down when my mom picked me up for the long drive home. I found out years later she hated the place for me and cried more than once, but she wasn't in charge of the man-making in our house. My dad was a good soul, but he never played toss with me in the front yard and left it to my sisters to teach me how to throw a punch. They were the only ones I told about the bullies and their towel-snapping, pants-pulling, nipple-twisting ways. But half those assholes are dead, and some others have apologized, and I am jogging back to my son's place, not breaking a sweat. His toddler and I will play peekaboo and read books and snuggle into the cold sun sets.
That's great. Very memorable images and details in that. The Best Revenge. Thanks so much for sharing that, Dick.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Bye-bye.
Yeah, pleasure as always. Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with The Best Revenge. Let's go next to Nivedita Karthik.
Hello.
Hey, Nivi, it's great to see you.
Tim, it's good to be here.
Yeah, so what do you have for us?
A slightly humorous take on breaks, like
Great.
the literal break. And when I think most people, at least of my generation and the younger ones, do need to take a break. The art of the break. Sometimes a break is just what the doctor ordered or the barista suggested when you've been staring at screens too long, muted by emails and memes. Breaks are the sneaky rebels of productivity, like sneaking a snack during a diet. Necessary, guilty, but oh so satisfying. They come in all shapes. A nap that feels like a mini vacation, or just staring at the wall until the blinking cursor becomes your new best friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. The art of the break, definitely something we all need to start doing a little more of. I know I could use some breaks. I don't take them, so thanks. Thanks, Nivi.
Me too.
Yeah, great reminder.
We all do.
Yeah. That was Nivi DeKarthik with the art of the break. Next, let's go to Thomas Mixon.
Hello. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Thomas, great to see you.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Yeah, I'm glad
I've got
you're
a
joining
poem.
a lot more lately. It's great to see you. You always have such creative things too. So good to see you.
Well, thanks. I've been listening for years, and I'm just one of our early New Year's resolutions is I've listened to so many of your voices for so many years, and I just why not participate? Because I've loved it for many years. So thank you.
Oh, definitely. Well, thank you. Well, what do you got for us this week?
A poem called Spring Awakenings.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. Intact, the fourth wall limpid as the sky on a cloudless morning, the boy manages to convince us it's a cloudless morning from the stage. He's sitting high on an architectural student's senior project, meant to be a hillside, and he's tossing light green grapes, real ones, into his mouth. So chock full of confidence, we don't notice that he's choking for real. I smile. He's a convincing actor, I think, clapping along with everyone else, the thrust of our eagerness bouncing off the theater walls. And he's still eating. He must be, because he doesn't show at all, while we shower him with praise during the curtain call.
Oh, that's so fascinating. That is a different. I've never seen a poem do that. Where'd you come up? So if you're only, I think you could hear, based on how Thomas was reading it. But if you're only listening, each sort of line break is a word cut in half. But the thing is that the word cuts in half with a full actual word, which makes it even more jarring than it normally would be to have a hyphenated word. So how did you come up with the idea to do this, Thomas?
I mean, it kind of stems from a memory from watching. I've never seen a musical version of this play, but there's the play called Spring Awakening, and there was a young man really choking on the stage, and so I wanted to sort of break the fourth wall. So trying to figure out how that would work formatting wise, just having a lot of fun. I know a lot of people in the comments have talking about playfulness, having fun, having it read as one way, and then kind of jilting that expectation a little bit into the next line, so that you can kind of get something out of it visually and aurally as well.
Yeah, well, very cool. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Hey, thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, it was Thomas Mixon with Spring Awakening. Next up, let's go to our reigning prompt poet of the month, Laura Berg.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. How you doing?
Joyous poems coming from this prompt.
Yeah, definitely. I'm loving them today.
Okay, we'll give it a try.
Okay.
Broken water lines. This phrase, broken water, could begin on a lake or at sea, a choppy patch trying to sink us, not trying, just there. Or it could start outside the house and snake in through supply lines bubbling with sweetness, then stream out again through earnest waste pipes. Mostly we forget such lines until one bursts into floods, mold, arguments with insurance and each other, that tightness, a passing condition of the heart. Really, it could start inside the mother, as in the one before her, and before her, the way the membrane unsnaps for fluid and all its yellowed mystery to herald a birth, the way the mind works through its predicaments, water breaks, words pour.
Another delicately beautiful poem, Laura, as your work so often is. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Laura Burke with Broken Water Lines. Next up, let's go to Leslie Ann Skechterson.
Hi.
Hey, Leslie Ann, great to see you.
Hey. Yeah, great to be here. Wow, a lot of great poems tonight. Really great conversation with Julia.
Definitely.
Wow.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah. So what do you have for us this week?
The piercing silence of empty rooms. When you were born, all the nights you kept me awake watching the Olympic Games because you wouldn't sleep, because it was dark all the time, because that's the way it is in Washington State in winter, dark and cold. And why wouldn't you sleep? Your sister slept deeply all the time. So much quiet. Is it because she was the firstborn? Or was it the sun spreading warmth, melting her chill? When you thought you were free, all the nights you drove 40 miles to load UPS trucks, then drove to classes, then napped before training in the gym, then your way of beating out the anger from the absent father who left you dark and cold. When did you ever sleep? You became a pro fighter, MMA, so much success. Is that when you took your first hit? Or was it the needle injecting the warmth, numbing your pain? You got all the breaks I had to give. All my love, all my trust, all my patience, all the $20 bills you asked for. Why then? All the burned foil in your door, all the meth hidden in your drawer, your clothes soaked in the grunge, leaving holes in my heart, the sponge soaking up all my tears, streaming through all the breaks in the walls until the door frame falls on my bed, just missing my head. A final call forced me to end it all. Protection order. All the breaks in my heart.
Oh, well, what a great use of the hyphen form there, with so much emotional, raw energy in that body section, and then the haiku standing out so much. Really great stuff. Thanks so much for sharing that, Leslie Ann.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's Leslie Ann Skechterson with The Piercing Silence of Empty Rooms. Let's see. Next, let's go to Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Stephen. Good to see you.
Thank you. When Katie described the prompt and she opened it up with the homophone for BRAKES, that opened this up for me. So this is a time when I probably should have died. So that was the break I was given. I was in Iraq for the first 6 months. I was at Camp Taji. I drove an armored carrier, and armored vehicles had to leave the hatch open because so many had rolled into the canals that are a lattice work in North Baghdad, and people had drowned. And so gunners on top of Humvees and armored carriers and tanks, all those guys were vulnerable to IEDs. About a month and a half after the event of this poem, a journalist named Bob Woodruff was hit by an IED. I think he was with maybe ABC News. It was about a mile from where this poem takes place. I was able to watch his slow recovery on TV because he was famous, but that was sort of just emblematic of a lot of people that suffered the same thing. So this is Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped the patrol as lead vehicle, watching the blowflies' interest in a dead dog ahead. My movements dust settling on me in the open hatch, and the LT, men call him LT over the radio, asks for details. Negative, no wires, nothing around it. But this time I won't move, just say I don't like it. So we sit in the shimmer heat while I picture a spread out makerspace in a dusty, sun-shaded house, a bearded man's portrait on the wall, AK resting in a corner. Think, his house is in the village though. Think, I don't want to move this time. The sun breathes an open oven heat on us without the breeze of movement, while I think of last Friday, a heel of shrapnel sticking out of a sergeant's arm, the dowels of elbow tendons visible in bloody flesh, his smiling at someone's joke as the PA works with sure hands and say, I just don't like it, and I won't move. So LT finally says, go around. The gunner above me skips a warning shot onto oncoming traffic as I climb over the road's median and others follow my tracks. Later, we learn over the radio how our dog rose up in a demon roar on a patrol behind us.
Yeah, another harrowing poem. A lot of intensity in that one. Thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen.
Yeah,
it really does feel like you're working into a real manuscript of these poems.
Yeah,
this experience. Yeah,
that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to steal the title of a famous book to maybe draw attention, or maybe just be called a thief. But yeah, it's going to be all war poetry. It's going to be called War and Remembrance. Yeah, and I never found out if these guys died. It was a MP patrol that was behind us, but at Camp Taji, people died. It was like there were 3 or 4 deaths a week. So yeah, I don't know, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen. Stephen Croft with Fortune. Next, let's go to Chelsea McGlynn.
Hello.
Hey, Chelsea, great to see you.
You too. So for this prompt, my immediate thought was line breaks. And that made me think of centos because they all automatically have interesting line breaks since you don't get to control where the lines are breaking. And then I was thinking, since I'm continuing to write about Frankenstein and Mary Shelley, that a cento is the perfect form for Frankenstein's monster, a parts all put together. And it didn't go the direction I thought it would, but here it is.
Great, yeah.
Origin story. Some sense went wrong, like Frankenstein's creation. I could feel the knife, like a chaste kiss, cut skin I had been given. Did they even think of me when the lights cut out? I howled and squirmed. Priests of pharmaceuticals did nothing but tie thick knots into my body, or I'll be damned if lightning don't still replicate endlessly. Try breaking. Paste those scars, spread a second skin, stitching darkness like a name into the mouth of the wound. Didn't they know Frankenstein had abandoned old techniques of fluids, electricity, and storms? Doctor, my shadow is checking the time, chanting, go, go, go. Nurses, some saints, they crouch there too, faltering in terror. The soiled sheets, wringing them out of bodily ills. The womb, a throat word, a word of blood. Dying people are always a poet. Here, let the torn poems sail from me like a flock of tongues bitten through. Is that mothering? I have to ask, because my baby licked clean the rich yolk and left, before the rest of it, before the paper gown sticky with the function of motherhood. Witnesses to my suffering, these poems go light a candle in my darkest room, just enough light to speak of it.
Yeah, well, beautiful poem. And then I love how with centos you have you attribute each line and you see how much goes into that. So we got poems from Wyatt Prunty, Margaret Atwood, Austin Alexis, Pauline Grubbs, Matthew Zapruder, Heather Kays, Jason Irwin, Catherine St. Dennis, Donica Kelly, Jericho Brown, James Wright, T.S. Leonard, C.A. McAllister, Annie Finch, Monica Gomery, Stephen Dunn, Petra Cuppers, Margaret Atwood, Ollie Blythe, Martin Vest, Susan Vespoli, James Wright, Saito Rai Ronchi, Islet Amate, Dante DiStefano, Sarah Lemon, Dan DePrima, Derek Walcott, Lucille Clifton, Paula Bruni, Donica Kelly, Lucille Clifton again, Gemma Mathewson, Paul Tran, June Jordan, Peter Cooley, Ali Trotta, and Claudia Emerson. A bunch of poets who have been on the Rattlecast, actually, in that, too. So very fun. Thanks so much for sharing that, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Centos are one of those forms. We had, who was it? Was it Erin Murphy that was sharing a lot of centos in her episode? I think. Anyway, it's a really interesting form to do. That was Origin Story by Chelsea McGlynn. Let's see. Next, let's go to Steve Horrell.
Hi there.
Hey,
Uh,
Steve. Great to see you.
I'm almost embarrassed to read this poem. The poems are so good tonight,
They
and
are, but I'm
I
sure
just got
yours is great too,
captivated.
Steve.
I just got captivated with the fact that uh, Willie Sutton, a famous bank robber and escapee from prisons, escaped from a prison the night I was born in the same city.
Hmm.
So I felt a certain kinship in a weird way. So this poem's called Willie Sutton. February 9th, 1947, Women's Medical Hospital, Philadelphia. My mother's water broke. My first escape. Same night, Holmesburg Prison, Philadelphia, Willie Sutton, along with Freddie Tenuto and three others, dressed in guards' uniforms, lashed two ladders together over the wall. Most were captured the following day. 5 years later, February 1952, Willie Sutton captured. Judge Farrell sentenced him 30 to 120 years, Attica State Prison, New York. Willie dressed well, was incredibly polite during his crimes, robbed over 100 banks, often dressed as a policeman, mailman, or maintenance worker, nicknamed the Actor and Slick Willie. He never carried a loaded gun, didn't want to hurt anybody. Allegedly, if a woman screamed or a baby cried, he just left the bank. 1968, my first plane flight. Left on a Whisper jet, Philadelphia to Montreal. Another break. December 1969, the same Judge Farrell commuted his sentence due to good behavior and deteriorating health. 1997, the U.S. issued me a CLN, Certificate of Loss of Nationality. Another break. After prison, Willie Sutton lectured on prison reform, consulted with banks.
Well, very interesting. A lot of detail. I didn't know anything about Willie Sutton, and so it's a lot of cool things to learn. Thanks for sharing that, Steve.
Yeah, well, when I was doing the research on it, I kept thinking, is this an essay? At any rate, it's been a really good evening. I absolutely love that woman tonight.
Oh, great. Well, great to
Julia.
hear that.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much,
Okay.
Steve. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
that
night.
was Steve Horrell with Willie Sutton. Next, let's go to Mary Lisa D. Diminishus.
Hi.
Hey, Mary Lisa. Great to see you.
Great to see you and everybody else tonight. So I'll give a very short intro. When I was 29, I had brain surgery. I had been bleeding off and on in my brain for a year. I was working 2 jobs, going to school, and I had a son who was about to turn 7. This is a little bit about that. It's a Hyben and it's called Numbskull.
Wow. Okay.
It's easy to forget your own body, that you have a body, until it breaks open. The organics, almost mechanical properties exposed. And you're no more than an equation mapped out on a blackboard. Head splayed, bones stolen, only a thin veil of stapled skin stretched tight over freshly sawed skull, jagged to the touch, a soft spot in its center, and scabs that bleed forever after. Broken skin, broken skull, broken brain. The doctors don't warn you that every pore will become an open ear. Once the brain hits air, sounds seep into every corner of your body, vibrate beneath the skin. I listen, no longer afraid of foreign sounds no one else hears. Even as my slow-running drain begs, wait just another minute. The toaster says, you really need to eat. You're weak. Outside, a tiny bird chirps, right here, here. Another sings, you're pretty, but not to me. 25 years later, where my head still scabs, my hair falls out. Nickel in my brain, the doctor explains, catches sound waves. I'm not crazy when I hear things. I'm not schizophrenic. When the cat purrs from across the room, it tickles me and I laugh. When my husband laughs, it tickles like fingers and I giggle. Sometimes I find a small spot of blood on my pillow when I wake. Sometimes I get feelings. I write them down. Broken, mouth of the ocean, always open.
Oh wow, yeah, what a harrowing story, and really well written in that Hyben form. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mary Lisa.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
See you
so much.
Friday.
Yeah, definitely will. Yeah.
Bye.
Yep. Yeah, there's Mary Lisa D. Diminishes with Numbskull. Yeah, fascinating and powerful too. All right, next let's go to Tina Denetclaw. Hey, Tina, great to see you.
Hey, great to see you too. You're missing your sidekick.
I know, Katie, because you come in late, you didn't hear, but Katie's sick still from, we had to cancel the poetry space this week. Right. It was with a great guest too, so hopefully we have to reschedule. It was a week of cancellations with Billy Collins being sick, and then Katie was sick, so she couldn't do her favorite musician, which was going to be a guest. It's too bad, and her voice is not back yet, unfortunately, and I really miss her, definitely. It feels just a little, it's great to be with you all, but it's so much more fun when we have Katie's energy here. So anyway, what do you have for us tonight, Tina?
So I'm actually kind of still working on this one. So I guess I have to tell you ahead of time, the second stanza isn't right still. So, but here it is. Okay. Seismic. Breaking is a function of load on a bridge, on a leg, on your best friend's heart. How many fathoms of unmoored sea to crush hope from wedded life? How far from that gentle tide, where waves approach the shore and shoal, water on the floor drags and is overrun by water in fresh air, until gravity loads. Then the wave spills over itself and greets the inclined floor. His fault lies far below, in the mantle of his mind, deceit in the narrows until unfurled. The ocean bed breaks and throws so much might into the deep that the massive sea moves onto land as Herculean as wall of force. Okay, my husband doesn't know I'm on here. As a Herculean wall of force and never breaks. They're fighting with each other. A betrayal of the ocean against the safety of land, against the safety of a lover's trust, to be high ground, safe above the breaking waves.
Well, great use of that breaking prompt. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. And our cat's trying to take my husband's dinner, and he doesn't want her to do that. And
I don't blame him.
On so that I don't hear the TV while I read. And so we hear. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's all right. Thanks so much. You got through it wonderfully. Thanks, Tina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's Tina Denetclaw with Seismic. And let me say, I believe that's going to wrap up the Zoom. Let's see if I saw Ted here. Let's see what Ted had to share. This is his break poem, Pipe Break. And he says, Dear Tim and Katie, I've actually experienced one of these in Indiana. Okay, so Pipe Break. Let's go. Pipe Break. Again, this is Ted Bernal-Govera. At the calm of winter, I'm taking a shower. Outside, 19 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe colder. I must have felt icky, or have missed long, warm flow on my back to dare such chill. But during my happy scrubbing, galvanized steel split. Water had bulged somewhere and decided to go like teenage acne. In seconds, cold nothing went down my spine and down my front, lifting only fine layer of guck meant to be expelled in a thorough bath. The burst I didn't hear, but it seeped out into the frozen sod outside, I imagine, and down to the canal, filled that and flowed across the street to a big river not far away. Then it traveled to the delta that spread like fingers onto a bay that met the ocean. Then the sun rose that morning, not really too absorbent in winter. But I know for certain that my body, dirt, is now absolutely infinitely. Space Mist. All right, well, thanks so much for sharing that. It was Pipe Break by Ted Bernal Guevara. And fortunately, I never experienced, even though I lived in a lot of cold places, never got a broken pipe, but a lot of times with frozen pipes, you get out the heater with the little hair dryer, I guess that's what it's called, and heat up the pipes, and then finally you can take a shower again. Yeah. Anyway, that was Pipe Break by Ted Bernal Guevara, and that's going to wrap up the prompt lines for tonight. I wanted to share one bonus poem just for fun, because I don't think Katie saw this when she picked this as the prompt, but we had one poem in Rattle that is so much a poem for this prompt that I tried not to read it all week to make sure it wouldn't influence the poem that I wrote myself. And this is Kirk Robinson. It's way back from Rattle number 35. And I'm going to have Kirk read this, because why not? So it'll be about 2 minutes. Here we go. This is Kirk Robinson reading his poem, The Breaks. Here you go.
The Breaks. I've a friend who says, treat anything mechanical as if it's just about to break. I've a feeling, broken-hearted, he's talking about himself in relation to his ex-wife, but I don't tell him that. She called me break the news just before she left him. Breaking up was her phrase, as if we were all broken promise still in grade school. I'm leaving, she said, for good. I pictured him exactly where I knew he was at the time, in mid-schuss, breakneck, on a mogul-filled downhill in Vale. He wouldn't be back for 2 days, and no idea it would be to a broken home. And then, no note on the kitchen table or anywhere, no red box on the wall, in case of emergency, break glass. 2 weeks later, we sat, line break, in front of a ridiculous amount of beer. I was trying at that point to explain to him that humans didn't invent weaving, breaking point, that it was an innovation of certain brightly colored long-beaked birds, and when we stumbled upon the wonderful twisted nests, we figured them out by breaking them apart. Something in him broke loose, I guess. I'd been talking about homes and starting over, that type of thing, as if I could say anything groundbreaking about love. In retrospect, he probably should have broke my nose. But all he did was sit there, for the first time, slumped over in a bar and cry. I looked everywhere, he said, for a note. Everywhere. He kept saying it. What's the word? What's the word for one of those great big crashing waves?
Yeah, so that was Kirk Robinson writing the poem retroactively for this week's prompt, or retrocausally, I guess I should say, back in time. That was from Rattle number 35, way back in the summer 2021. Always fun to pull up some old poems. Anyway, that is going to wrap up the show for this week. Now, we do have some haiku to close out. So let's see what haiku we have. And Katie has this one. So we both have Christmas haiku. Little seasoning going on. Here's Katie's. Nutcracker, imposter syndrome. And if you're only watching, she did that thing where I think she's the only one I've seen do this, which is use the double colon, which means sort of a simile is coming. So Nutcracker, double colon, imposter syndrome. And of course those, nutcrackers do, because they can't actually crack nuts. So that's Katie's monoku. And mine is this. This is something I saw walking with my daughter yesterday. We went for a walk to get some sun while everyone else was sick. And this is two-story inflatable Santa, his puffed up wind. Two-story inflatable Santa, his puffed up wind. That is my haiku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Now, next week's prompt on the Rattlecast, and Katie did provide one, is going to be, it's a little longer to read, Think about the biggest improvement you've made as a poet this year and write a poem that showcases your skill. Include what you've learned in the notes with your submission. So there's a prompt for this week. Think about the biggest improvement you've made as a poet this year and write a poem that showcases that skill. That's going to be a lot of fun. That is next week's prompt. And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Manuel Iris. Now, finally, Dick Westheimer says, because he's been suggesting we have Manuel on for a long time. Manuel is the poet laureate, or former poet laureate of Cincinnati, and just a wonderful patron and supporter and houser of poetry. Also a bilingual poet, so this is a bilingual book. The Whole Earth is a Garden of Monsters. And it's going to be really fascinating to talk to Manuel. That's going to be next week's guest, Rattlecast number 323 with Manuel Iris, Monday, December 22nd, the usual time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Also, should note after that, we have a week off between Christmas and New Year's, so we're going to skip that episode. But the guest is going to be Manuel Iris, Rattlecast 323, next Monday, December 22nd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.